Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and today I am joined by creative conservationist, wildlife artist, poet, and generally lovely, amazing, wonderful person, Alicia Hayden, to discuss her journey into wildlife artivism, what this is, and how it can make science far more accessible for everybody. This lets us cover everything from how Alicia got into art through kind of drawing and writing little stories when she was younger, and now how that has transformed into something she wins awards for, and how she uses it to work with organisations like the BBC and publish 3 collections of poetry and do all sorts of other amazing things that just make me very jealous but excited at the same time because they're fabulous and wonderful and yeah, absolutely brilliant. We also discuss some of the most amazing things that Alicia has worked on, some of her favourite pieces, the ones that you should go and check out, and of course how we are all able to become artists in our very own way, which I think is exciting because I haven't drawn or painted since high school, and I think, you know, I get those thoughts of like, I can't do this. She does amazing things that are amazing. I am nothing in art. But I think she does a really good job of explaining, no, everybody can be an artist, which is so exciting. And of course, we talk about her favourite underappreciated species, which, no spoilers, but let's think of a good way of teasing it. It has a long migratory pattern that might turn your head. Oh no. I'm sorry. If you got that, I'm sorry because you realise how bad that joke is. If you have to wait an hour to hear how bad that joke was and realise how bad that joke was, I'm so sorry. But that is enough for me. I hope you have a lovely time listening to this week's episode, and let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Alicia Hayden, a wildlife artist who's worked with organisations like the BBC and BTO, a poet whose new work, Multicoloured Ghost Towns, is absolutely amazing and fantastic, and I love it, and I can't wait to talk about it, and an overall amazing, charming, wonderful, very endearing, charismatic person who I'm very glad to have here today. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, honestly.
No, I'm so excited to have you. Like, I feel like you're one of these people. There's sometimes when I meet people so me and Alicia, we know each other from outside of podcasting. We have met before, and I think that there's these people that I meet sometimes where I'm like, as soon as I meet them, I'm like, I need to have them on the show. We need to talk, and we need to talk about their work. And then months go by because I'm just like, oh, they must have either been on the show or we'll organize it soon. And then months and months and months go by and they never are. And so I'm so glad that we finally have sat down to record an episode and a conversation because, yes, I really love what you do. And I think when you're talking to someone at a conference or an event or like over Instagram, you don't get to dig into the meat of what they do. So, yes, I'm very excited to chat. I guess I've hyped you up quite a lot now to the listeners. Just to really add pressure. But I guess to get us started, I always ask the same first question, which is, I have introduced you, I've hyped you up, but could you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them maybe a little bit about who you are, what you do? Yeah, just let them know a little bit about you.
Yeah, so hello. I'm Alicia. I'm essentially a creative conservationist, which I say because it's easier than sort of listing all of the different disciplines I work in. So I do a lot of art, I do a lot of writing, I do film editing, a bit of animation. But essentially I'm using kind of art to communicate about like the natural world and about science and try and inspire other people to engage with it, which is always really exciting. And I've done work for lots of different organisations, which is really cool. And did like a music video and stuff last year, which was wicked. But yeah, I'm particularly passionate as well about wildlife artivism, which is where you create an art piece which is has got like a scientific message, and the aim of that is to sort of incite a change in like thought or behaviour of whoever looks at it. And I did a piece in 2020 that looked at a whale and noise pollution, which was really wicked. And I've just finished an elephant, which is on my wall behind me.
Oh, that is the perfect, I think, nailed the introduction, because I can now, there's so many things there that I'm like, all of these themes will come up throughout. I think I will ask you about all of them, because like it's one of those things where like I think I first became familiar with you, like I think we met at like maybe the Chester Zoo Youth Symposium or something, and then and the first thing that I saw, I think, was because it was on your business cards.
It was on
I
my business
think
cards, the
you
whale.
it was the
Yeah.
whale, which was, yep, I really I remember being like, oh, I really love that, and then seeing on Instagram. I think that's the thing, is like there's some people who are creative and do like one thing. Like I'm like I like to think of myself as creative, and I do podcasts, and that's what I do. That's my creativity and my creative outlet. But then there's other creative people, and I think you're one of these people that when I clicked onto your account, I was like, oh, they're creative in the sense of they are doing everything in every way of being creative. They can do it. So there's so much to talk about, and like I think your introduction summed that out quite nicely. And I guess like the thing that I wanted to ask is like, obviously when you're a creative conservationist, when you're doing these things, I guess growing up, like I want to know how you get to that point. Like, was it something that like growing up you were like, I love creating things, and then you realized afterwards like nature is a good way to express myself, and this is something that I can, there's a meaning behind it when I do nature related things? Or was it like, I love nature and I want to protect it? Or was it they both kind of developed all at once in kind of a perfect mix of things?
Yeah, so it was basically the last one. It was both at the same time. So I'm from North Yorkshire. I don't have a Yorkshire accent, which is a bit sad, but I've never had it. And yes, I grew up in North Yorkshire, and both of my parents really love nature, and we have dogs, and so we always were in the natural world, and we were always kind of grew up in the countryside. Lots of wildlife sort of around us, and I was very lucky because they also were quite knowledgeable. So I kind of was introduced to wildlife from, I don't know, ever, like since I was tiny. And equally, I was always like drawing and stuff. Like I liked painting. We used to put our I don't know if you had this when you were a kid, but we used to put our paintings on the walls in our kitchen. So we had like a little like art gallery of me and my sister. So I've always been really creative as well. And I think often I drew things that I could see, and a lot of that was animals and plants and things, lots of rainbows, lots of birds. And I think it was just a really natural, I think everybody has kind of a natural capacity to love the natural world. And for me, I was lucky because I was encouraged. And then I sort of just, I don't know, just kept going. And I loved writing, and I used to write lots of little stories and illustrate little tiny stories for like kids when I was little. Like, it was just a really natural way of me kind of experiencing things and trying to understand things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's yeah, and I guess that's the nice thing is like, I don't know. I guess when you look at the world in that kind of like way of like, oh, like you just glance at it and you go, oh, that's pretty. But I feel like to do something like, especially when you're younger, to like draw or to write or to do things, you actually have to really look at stuff and appreciate. And like, it probably helps that appreciation so much to be like, oh, I'm not just like doodling. I'm like, I want to look at that and draw it, and like I want to write about it or think about it. Like I can see exactly how you'd go from like, oh, I just like I'm in late nature a lot, now I'm drawing about it. Like those two things are only going to amplify each other. Like they're just going to, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I think I especially like sort of like birds and invertebrates and stuff. Like, I don't know, whenever like birds would kind of like occasionally we'd have birds that might like pop into our house accidentally, or like pop into the window, but they'd be fine, and then we'd kind of like, I think that made me sort of see them a little bit closer. But I was also really into like bugs and stuff, and really into ants. Like, I wrote a lot about ants. I have lots of little stories all about ants. I found some like when I was like clearing out stuff at home during like lockdown and stuff, and I found like a whole story all about like ant deforestation. And I already knew I'd done like little cartoons of ants. I was like, wow, between like 6 and 8, ants were really, I was really into them.
I mean, I feel like we all have those weird, not weird phases. That would be mean. Are those phases where we're like weirdly focused on something
Yeah.
though? We're like, I love ants. Like, I guess like I always think this like, so when I was in Amsterdam last year, me and my friend went to like Artist, the zoo that's there, and they run like, it looks like, so they run like arts workshops where people come in and like draw, and there was all these people in the like invertebrate house, and I think like I can see why, if you were liking to draw and create things, little things, they're quite mechanical in the way that they look, but they're also natural, but they're kind of, so I can see why the mind would attach to something like an ant.
Yeah, I think they're very charismatic, and I think they're quite satisfying to draw because they're like a snowman.
Yeah, it's hard to go wrong. It's like once you got the base down, the circles and then some legs, it's like, yeah, it's fine. Um, I guess before we become hyper fixated on ants, which I mean, fully valid episode, but maybe something for another time. I wondered, like, you kind of talked about it there, but like you kind of, as you grew up, and then I guess you go from like drawing things because you love them and are interested by them, and then you mentioned already this kind of artivism aspect, and like how you do now create things that are more than just like, here is a drawing of
Yeah.
X. Like there's more there to it, and I wondered, like, how do you go and like from I love doing these things into now I love doing these things, but I want them to have like a message and an intention behind them more than just I love them. Like how does that change happen, and what's like the intention behind your work now, I guess?
Yeah. So with wildlife artivism, I think I was first introduced to it because there's another wildlife artist, another wildlife activist called Martin Aveling, and I think it was during kind of a weird lockdown period, and I think I was sort of mooching around on Instagram, and I'd only really just made my professional account, like I'd never really showcased my work before, and I was mostly showcasing my wildlife photography when I first set up as well. And I think I found Martin's work, and I really liked it. I just thought it was really cool. And he founded wildlife activism as a movement. And he had one piece in particular, which was a tiger transitioning into a barcode, and I just loved it. I thought it was so cool, and it just really made me think, and I just thought it was really different. I'd not seen like things doing that with wildlife before. And like with tigers, it's looking at sort of the commercial aspect of their skins and stuff like that. The idea of the barcode, the commercial aspect of tigers, and I just thought it was really interesting and really different. And I think I was studying my degrees in biology, and I was studying at the time. I was in my second year, and so I was reading a lot of scientific papers, and I was drawing all the time. And I kind of was like, I probably need to be revising and doing my essays, but I also want to be doing drawing. And so the compromise I sort of found was, well, if I illustrate what I'm learning about, then I'm doing both. Uh, and so I kind of started illustrating a little bit about what I was learning about, and that was really fun. And then I was doing a summer school with British Ecological Society, and we had to write a blog post as part of the summer school practicing psychom, science communication. And I did it on whales and noise pollution, and then that led me down this whole wormhole. And I applied the same logic as as with my degree of going, well, I've written this blog post, and I love writing, but I would like to illustrate this as well. And then I was thinking about Martin's piece and of things transitioning, and it kind of all fell together. And I was like, oh, what if I do something which is visually representing this idea of noise pollution and fragmenting whale communication? And that kind of led me down that little wormhole. But even when I was trying to come up with a piece, it wasn't like straightforward. It wasn't like I clicked and was like, oh, this is how I should do it. I chatted to like mates and stuff, and I bounced ideas around, and I was like, how do I actually showcase this so other people will understand it? Because it's fine for me because I've read the papers, but most people won't have read the papers. So how do you come up with that kind of visual representation? And so that's kind of then the mentality that I apply for all pieces. So often now I'll come across something in the news, or I'll read a paper, or or I'll just know about something. Like a lot of the pieces I do also do with birds, just because that's something I know a little bit more about, and particularly birds and light pollution, because it's something I find really interesting. And then I'll find papers and check everything, or I'll just have a quick look online and make sure I'm not about to massively misinform people. And then I'll try and sort of plan it in my head. I've got quite a very visual imagination, and I'll normally also brainstorm stuff with other people. So I'll kind of bounce ideas about. I looked over my shoulder at a piece, and I was like, actually, I didn't brainstorm that with anyone. I just sat down and I did it. But That was that was that was a little bit more unusual. But yeah, so normally I'll brainstorm them with people, or like even when I do a piece, even if I've just done it off my own back, I will show it to someone before I decide if it's finished to check that they can understand it. Because a big part of Artivism is obviously the interpretation and the fact that someone else can clearly see what it's about. So it's okay if sometimes they're a bit ambiguous. Like I tried a sort of abstract piece last year, and that one does need more explanation. And that kind of comes in the form of a caption. So all of your sort of one of the most important aspects of an Artivism piece is also that little description. So either like the thing that goes on to it next to Instagram, goes on Instagram next to it, or just what you put next to it in a gallery or something. Like it's that little bit of text, and that is normally where you explain a little bit of the science as well. I actually have no idea if I ever just answered your question. I think I just went off on one, but yeah.
No, you got, yeah, no, I think that was because the question was like, how do you get from like just drawing something, creating something as a young, like, as like, yeah, I'm going to do this into more intentional work. And I think that's exactly what you said. So yeah, I think that made perfect sense. And I think like, it was really interesting. And it raised a couple questions in my head of things that I was like, I appreciate, and also I'm now like, oh, that I hadn't thought about. So the one that I was like, I appreciate that was like, I think so. I'm doing a PhD just now, and one of the major, and I'm not saying if anyone from who is doing academic work is listening, this is not this that like, please don't take this personally. I think because I would also hold my hands up that I'm not always the best at it, but like I think sometimes people who work in research and do these things within certain institutions churn out so much fantastic information. They churn out fantastic scientific research. But realistically, the general public, unless the BBC or a news organization or a documentary picks up on it and runs with it, are very rarely going to sit down and read an academic paper, right? They're not like, it's not going to be a thing. And they're kind of, and sometimes when the scientists themselves do interviews or try and communicate that paper themselves, it sometimes can come across almost like they're lecturing like they would in a university, which isn't necessarily right for the general audience either. So like I think taking that really good factual scientific stuff and finding a way to like make it into something that is more appreciable by everyone is so important. And so like, yeah, like I really love it because I think it's like, yeah, like to have work that's informed but like
This is it.
accessible.
Yeah, and I
Mm-hmm.
think as well, it's nice when you work with, because I am a scientist, but it's nice when you work with scientists because I think it's exciting for them to like have their work interpreted in a different way. Like it's a really cool thing, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's literally this is the biggest thing I think with it. It does make science more accessible because even if people want to read papers, often they're behind a paywall or an institution wall, and so it's hard to actually get access to them. And so I think this can make it a little bit more accessible, and it breaks it down, right? It makes it easier to understand, which I think is great because science should be accessible for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is like it should be a good like that's why like I really love things like the wildlife photographer of the year because everybody loves a good picture. Like I really love like when there's like things like this that are like take what can sometimes be quite an exclusive space and just open it up to everyone. I really love like I really love. Um, and the other thing that you said that I actually made me think a little bit was like I feel like a lot of the time, and this is my high school art coming into my mind. A lot of the time, like obviously, artists have intention behind their work and what they might want you to see, what you might want you not to see. But like a lot of the time, I feel like I was always told like art is up for interpretation by whoever looks at it, right? And it's like this thing of like if you if I look at a piece by Frida Kahlo or I look at a piece by like Vincent van Gogh or like like there's 100 ways to interpret each of those things based
Yeah.
on your understanding of their life and all these sorts of things. But like to do something that has this scientific backing, it doesn't take away like the like I could look at something and have a real emotional connection in a way somebody else did or see something. But like it's interesting that you said that there's this more like not there's like a guiding hand, I guess, by you being like you can interpret it, but this is kind of what I meant. Like that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. Because it is still very much up for interpretation. Like I've had people, like
Mm-hmm.
I present about my work and in talks and things, and I'll often ask people before I say what it's about. I'll ask who I'm talking to what they think it's about. And it's interesting because people are always in the right area. Sometimes people get exactly it, but sometimes they will get a different thing from it, and it's still right. It's still completely valid. And I find it really interesting because people have read something slightly different, a different angle based on how they have connected with the piece. And I think that's really cool to me. It's really exciting as an artist seeing your work interpreted like that, because they're still getting a message. They're still understanding what it is you're trying to say, but they're seeing it in a different way, or they're seeing slightly different parts of the piece are coming out to them more. And I think that's really cool because like I say, like art is, well, like you said, like art is it's a very human thing. It's a human connection thing, and people will connect with work differently. And within my work, people connect with different pieces differently, which is really interesting as well.
That's and I don't know, like for it's I guess trying to find those things that hook in people's mind and make them go, whoa, that, like, and really make them think while also kind of like learn it. Like, it must be a very delicate balancing act of like getting this like exactly right, that I'm not telling. I'm not like, here is like a
Yeah.
because that's the because it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. And I'm glad you said that, because I'd never thought about that before. And I'm now thinking back through all of the pieces of art that I've seen of yours, and I'm like, I wonder if I've looked at that
Well,
correctly. I'm going to go back and read through the captions. Like,
if you didn't, because you couldn't come to Chester last year because of the flooding, but that was literally like
mhm.
that was what we did then.
This is
I
every time I hear about last year, everyone listening, last year, me and Jodie, the co-host of Razoo, were meant to go to Chester for their youth symposium. It would have been the third year in a row, and it would have been the first year I'd been there not doing a talk, so I would have been able to like just enjoy and sit back and relax. And then all of the trains. You'd think in Scotland we would have a train system that could resist flooding, given how much it rains here. But there was floods everywhere, all the way down the country. Couldn't go, and now I'm even more upset that I couldn't go, because I'm now like, oh, great, wonderful.
just wondered,
Another thing.
it was were rubbish that day. Like,
Oh, I'll need to. It just justifies a trip this year, because I got the money back on my insurance, because I was like, I'm claiming
yeah,
this. I'm a poor student. I can't be sitting around with no, just taking the hit here. So I can use the money this year to go again. No, that's fantastic. And I guess I like what's interesting is like I feel like we've kind of talked about it, but like I I feel like, so one of the questions I was going to ask was about your creative process and how you think things through. And I guess like we've kind of talked about how you create something that means something, and you've talked about how you take the scientific papers and you do these kind of like, and you interpret them in your way. But I guess the part of the story that like is missing in that, in my mind, a little bit, that I'd like to know more about in terms of the creative process is, how do you pick in the first place what speaks to you? You know, like, is it just like, oh, I see something one day and I have to do something? Or is there these things in your head where you've got them banked and you're like, I want to do that? Like, how does this all come together?
it really varies, to be honest, and the creative process varies as well. Because the scientific paper is kind of is one angle of the creative process, which is great. But I mean, because when I'm writing, again, depends what I'm writing. But if I'm writing poetry, I tend to have like words and phrases that will just start becoming essentially like an earworm in my head, and I'm just like, oh, okay, and then it develops in my head, and then I write it down, and it's one of those things where I can't. It becomes irritating because you're just there like going round and round and round with these words, and then often that happens when I'm like walking around, like going for walks, like, well, like, I think I remember reading somewhere that like some of the best places to have creative thoughts are those kind of in between spaces, as in like getting on and off public transport, or like getting in and out of a shower, like the things where it's a menial task and you're not having to think about it, but you're not really thinking of anything else, and your brain has this little, like, it's like white noise for your brain has that time to suddenly think about things, and then you can be more creative. And I think, yeah, like my creative process, like coming up with ideas, I think sometimes it is just that I'll feel really passionate about something. So like I'm working on a project at the moment to do with ornithology, so birds, and that is obviously something that I feel really passionate about, and something that is like a really personal story, and therefore that is something that I want to do, and that's kind of been banked for a while and has been kind of percolating, and now it's slowly being being worked on. Sometimes it will be really random, and I'll just suddenly come across something and I'll be like, oh, that really, it just really excites me, and I'll be like, okay, I've got to do that. Sometimes I'm trying to think how I did because I did an elephant piece relatively recently, and it's based off one of my photos, but I wouldn't have been looking at the photo, so I don't know. I'm trying to work out why I decided to do that piece. Maybe it just kind of popped in my head. Occasionally, I have this really odd thing where very occasionally I will dream up something, and I'll wake up and I will just have a fully formed piece in my head, and then I have to do it like immediately. And it doesn't happen much, but when it does, it's great because you've just been handed an idea. It's wonderful. And then sometimes it's when I'm speaking to people and they'll say something, they'll mention a species I've not heard of before, or they'll say about a behavior, or they might mention like I don't know, an art style, or someone will mention something to me basically, and then I will be like, oh my god, that would be wicked to kind of write about or to illustrate, and then I will see what I can do. So yeah, it really varies. Also, if it's like on commission for somebody, so if it's a collaborative thing, then it's different again, because then it's working with someone or working to a brief. So yeah.
I guess I feel like that was a very simple question for a very complicated process where I'm like, oh, it must just be this. You just sit down one day and you're like, I want to draw. Like, uh, no, that's it's so like it's really really interesting to think about, I guess, and like I especially like hearing about where these ideas come. Like, I guess, like, yeah, because I've had to start carrying around like something to write on at all times now, because it will be like, oh, I sit down on the train or I sit and do, and then it's like, oh, I'll remember that later, and you never do. If I never do, like if I don't write it down at that point, or like, oh, I think this would be a fun thing to do. No, it would be, but now it's gone out of my head, like in these transitional moments and spaces of like, no, need to start writing things down. So no, that's really interesting. And yeah, I guess like that's, yeah, there's so like, yeah, really really interesting to think about that, like back and forth and going like, oh, maybe like, should I do this, should I do that, how should I do this, and like the fully formed pieces, that must be, yeah,
Oh,
really
it's great.
interesting. Yeah.
So weird though.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't know what it is that, because sometimes it's not like I'll have been. I mean, I had a piece that the piece that's coming to my head is that I did a tiger paw that faded into nothing. It was a hunting tiger paw because it was on the hunt, but the idea it faded was because we had tigers. And it wasn't that I'd been reading about tigers or researching about tigers. It is completely random. I was ill at the time, and I woke up and I was like, oh, quite a great idea. And it was completely visual, and I was like, well, I've got to do it now. But yeah, it's odd. I don't know, because often it isn't even because I've been reading a lot about the species. It will just be my brain is clearly just having a little bit of processing time. I don't know how it does it. It's so random. I had another one for an elephant piece a few years ago, and that was like an ivory tusk that wanted to be in gold leaf to draw to the attention to the fact that um, we assign economical value to tusks when they're not attached to elephants, and yet they have an inherent value for elephants for their behaviour and things. And so I did it in gold leaf as a bit of a play on that. And again, that came to me completely fully formed, but in my dreams. And then I woke up and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. But yeah, I don't know how that
uh,
works.
That's, well, it's like, it's those things you often hear, like some of the biggest like singers and artists in the world being like, I wrote this whole song in 10 minutes in the middle of the night because it came to me. So it makes sense that it would also happen with visual things as well, where you're like, yeah, I now, like, I see this, I want to do it. Like, so obviously if it's like words, you can write them down quite quickly. Whereas
Yeah.
with an art piece, that would take presumably longer to get. So do you have to be like, okay, this is in my brain, like I've got to start right now and just do the whole thing, or do you try and like sketch out, like, or try and like make a little version of it or something to keep it in your, like, how do you what do you do when you're like, oh no, like there's an idea?
It
Like,
really varies. I mean, because like it really varies actually. Because sometimes I do work up. So with the elephant tusk piece, I did do a little version. I think I probably do that almost as soon as I woke up. Maybe like just
mhm,
or if I have an idea and I'm like out and about, I will try and sketch it, or like I'll try and go through it round and round in my head, try and lodge it somewhere in my brain,
mhm.
but I'll also make a little sketch somewhere. Sometimes the sketches are awful because it's on like a phone or something. It's like, I think someone saw one once and was like, "What have you drawn?" Like, it was a dog. It didn't look like dung beetles. So sometimes I'll try or I might try and describe it like just in words if I only have a phone on me. and I'm out and about and I've thought of something. But often it is with those pieces where it's like a sudden immediate, like I've got this idea and I must do it. I do try and do them as fast as I can, because it's like I want to, like I have a complete excitement too, and so realistically if I do anything else I'll be wanting to do that. So it's like I did a tree that was looking at wildfire, and that was I think maybe like September, and I was doing a different commission at the same time, and then I think I had that idea like mid other commission, had to pause the commission, did that for sort of an hour or so, and then went back to the commission. So like, yeah, it is, sometimes it's really immediate, sometimes I make sketches, sometimes I do a mini version then do the big version. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I love to get into people's brains about these things because I know everybody works in such different ways. And like, but even in like, what's weird is like in similar ways to even across disciplines. So like, for example, like if we're making podcasts, I'm in a phase right now where I'm like, let's, I've got like 16 episodes planned. I've got this, that, and the next thing. I'm going to do this, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And then I need a second to go away. And because I have all these ideas, and I need a second to go away, refresh, think, work on other things, then come back to this, and then go. And like, yeah, it's these weird moments of like, boom, and like, and then like, okay, now I've got another idea. Now I've got, okay. And like, yeah, it's really interesting how these things kind of, even if I'm not creating something in the same way, they go up and down and move around in similar kind of fashions. It's
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah. And like as well, for me, it's because it's working in multiple disciplines. They're all on their own little path, right? So, so at the moment, I seem to be I'm hitting the upward. I'm on the upward slope of my poetry wobble, if that makes sense. If it's like a wobbly oscillating diagram thing, then I'm on the upward bit for the poetry. So I seem to be in a bit of a poetry thing at the moment where there are lots coming to me, which is lovely because I wasn't a dip, so I was getting nothing. um, so, so whereas the art one is kind of, I've got a piece ongoing at the moment, and that is the kind of, I think at the moment I'm trying to do pieces that take me slightly longer, just because it fits better in with my work schedule, and so that means that the art one is becoming a sort of slow burn simmer, which is quite nice. It's a bit different from how I've been doing it over the last few years. It's a different way of exploring my art, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny how these things come in waves, and like even when you're like, yeah, it's yeah, and I think it's something we will never understand, and we could sit here for a full hour going, I wonder why, like,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know why it happens, but it happens, and it's nice to know that it is. But it's always good to know that it is keeping happening. There's always something going on. Like there is always like an idea somewhere. I guess like moving, so we kind of talked about that kind of creative process and like how you come up with things, and there's these ideas, and making that. And I've always wondered, because like I think I'm the type of person who, I'm a perfectionist, and I like to like make sure everything's exactly right and exactly done before I hand it away, and like it has to be exactly how I want it.
Mhm.
But I guess like that's quite tricky sometimes in a lot of creative fields where you're like, it's hard to let go of these things. So I wondered, like, once you get to the end of this, towards the end of this process where you're making things and you're getting to this stage where you're like, okay, this needs to be kind of wrapping up now, this needs to be like getting like, once you think like, how do you know if, again, I guess it varies between like commissions and different things, like, but like, how do you know you're kind of done, and then what happens with those pieces once they are done? Like, are you kind of like letting them go and going like, this is now for somebody else to look after and interpret, or is it something you're like, I don't really ever let it go, like it's always going to be my thing? Like what, yeah, how does that kind of stage work?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a perfectionist, which I think lots of people assume I am, and I'm definitely not. I don't think I'd ever. I think if I was a perfectionist, it would be so difficult to ever. I would never let go of a piece if I was perfectionist. Like I would just keep doing it. Whereas I think I love finishing things. Like I love working on things, but I love finishing things. And and I'll reach a point where I'll be like, it's done now. And it might be that with my art, it tends to be that essentially you have a bit of a. It's almost like it has a life, like it has an expiry date with how much you're gonna keep vibing with it. And so sometimes that is indefinite, and I think there'll be some pieces I've done that I will always love, and that they will always be important to me, and I always think, yeah, that was good. You did a good job there. But a lot of the pieces, I will start to like them less, or I will just have a different relationship with them. Like I'll just, because I think normally when I finish a piece, I do love it in that moment. I'm like, yes, this is how I want it to look. And then it almost depends how that relationship changes. Like if I start thinking, in the future, like, a few months down the line, I might think, oh, I could have done that differently. And then that changes how you sort of feel about your piece. And then sometimes you might redo them at a later date. I'm trying to think if I have ever redone pieces. When I don't like pieces, if I really don't like them, I'll repaint them, as in I'll paint over them. If they're on canvases, because canvases are expensive, so if you stop liking the piece, but there's a piece at the moment that I'm quite tempted to do that by, but I think my housemate was a bit like, no, I like it, so it's being left because other people are still liking the piece. I think I was just in a moment and I was like, I don't like it anymore. But when I finish pieces, I mean, I normally try and put them on social media, but it varies. So the elephant piece I keep referencing is not actually out yet. It's being held back. I've teased it quite a lot, but it's not out there yet because I think sometimes it's nice to to keep things back a little bit and then launch them a bit later. But often, unlike the bird project I'm working on, again, that's not out there. I've teased it a little bit, but it's very much got a launch date later this year when everything will go out related to that. So sometimes I hold things back and then I'll launch them on social media, or I might launch them in a physical exhibition. That doesn't happen that often, but if I have physical exhibitions and I have a whole collection of things ready, then that's a really cool way of doing it. And then people can physically go and see it, which is really exciting. When I do them on social media, I have little captions and stuff. And then when you put them out there, you're still owning it. It's still your copyright and stuff, but you're relinquishing the fact that it's yours in the fact that other people will interpret it how they want. And other people will read it how you want, and you can't control that anymore. And I think that's really nice, seeing how other people connect with pieces, if they connect with pieces. I always create pieces I love because then at least one person's liked it. um, and I think fundamentally, if you're happy with your work as an artist, it doesn't matter too much how many other people are going to connect with it, because you know that you've made something that you're pleased with. And I think that's really important, having that kind of element of sort of pride in your work, but not to a sort of silly level, like seeing how you can improve, but still loving it, and knowing that not everybody will like your work, because nobody will like everything you do. Like there have been pieces I've done where some people might like one piece and really not vibe with another of my pieces, and that's okay because they're not for everybody. Like they're different. I work in lots of different media, and so naturally it's not gonna if someone only likes my Barrow pieces, they're not gonna be happy if I go and do a Lino piece. That's okay, that's fine. But for that moment I might be wanted to do Lino. So I think it is that kind of thing of, you almost take a bit of a step back when you release your work, because I think if you're too attached to it and you're too emotionally involved with how other people are going to feel about your work, then you're going to really hurt, like you're going to get hurt yourself, because you're just and if someone did turn around to me and say, oh, I hate it all, then I think I would be upset about it, like
Yeah.
but in general, it is sort of having that, it's having that sort of little ability to kind of distance yourself a little bit once it's done. But when you're in it, you want to be really attached to it, because otherwise it's not going to look as nice, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's that thing, I guess, of like learning, like this is my thing. Like I've not read every book every book that I've ever read, I've not liked them all. Every poem that I've ever read, I've not liked them all. Every song I've ever heard, I've not liked them all.
Exactly.
But it doesn't mean like, and it's like that thing, because yeah, and I don't know, I guess it's probably harder for you because images are harder to avoid than your own voice. But I have this thing where, like, after a podcast is out there, I will never listen to it again.
Mm-hmm.
It is gone. It
Oh,
is
whenever
out.
I
Like,
like talks, I don't listen to them afterwards. Doesn't matter. Like if I do
no,
like a little thing on YouTube or like explain my work, I will never watch it again. Like
no,
it's
because
gone. I
it's.
don't look at it.
Hmm. And it's like, you're like, oh, why did I say that? Why do I sound like that? Why did I do this? Why did I do that? And it's like, I'm like, it's easier if I just let these things go, and they're out in the universe now. And like, if 100 people listen to it, if 1,000 people listen to it, if no one listens to it, does it really matter? Well, no. Like it matters to me that I had a good conversation with someone, I did a nice thing, and like it's been shared and it's reached someone, and those people have enjoyed what they've enjoyed. Like, yeah, and like I think there was a time where if you get too obsessed with these things, it kind of takes the joy out of it as well. Of like, because
Exactly.
you're overthinking everything. Like, oh, someone left me a 4-star review and not a 5-star review. Well, what does that mean? Do they hate me? Do they like?
Yeah.
It's like easier. Just let it go. Like, like this is it's now out there. It's the thing. Um, yeah, I guess like something that I was actually going to ask about that leads nicely on from that kind of conversation about it being out there is that like you obviously don't just work for yourself. You also work with organizations. Like I've seen you doing work with the BBC and like you do things with the BTO and all sorts of things. Like when you do those things, like does it feel like exciting to know that because obviously like they have very large audiences and like very big like big organizations, well renowned concert. Like does it feel good to know that like the things that you're doing like are reaching these bigger audiences and like being out there? Like how does that feel to know that like the things that you produce like are reaching these huge audiences and see like people are seeing them and loving them and appreciating them?
I think it's cool. I mean, I think so with my job with the BBC, that's where I work, sort of 9 to 5. So I work in children's TV, and so that a lot of the work, I essentially I work in two different teams at the moment, and some of that work is all internal, and it's all kind of seen by people internally and commissioners as well, and that's really cool because you're doing something and it's for someone, and I don't have ownership over it, but it's cool to think that like part of what I do, which is like graphics and illustration and stuff and research, that is helping create new ideas and new shows. And so that's cool because although it's never really seen by the public in that area because it's all development, um, it's nice to think that some of those things feed into things that eventually the final product is someone will see, is something that somebody will see, even if they don't see the initial things that I did on it. So that's quite a cool thing. It's all very, it kind of is one of those things where it's very imaginative and theoretical, but it's really exciting because it's quite creative. And then the other part of like that job is working like on a specific program, and that's kind of more like research and script work, like script supervising and like fact checking. And so again, that's cool because you're kind of it's sort of being a little bit more scientific and like a little bit more, I don't know, you're being creative but again in a different way, and so people again will see the show and it's not really, it's not, you're not in it at all and you're not, but you've helped make something with a team of people who are all lovely, and so that's really, it's a kind of different way of working, but it's really exciting. And I think especially making stuff for children like is really fun because it's like I think kids get so excited about stuff like they're like little sponges. It's why they're fun to teach and stuff as well. So that's kind of like the BBC work is sort of, I just feel like I need to disclaim that because because it's a slightly different way of working. But when I work with like organizations like BTO or like Mammal Society, and then it's kind of like art and writing or like youth work, um, that is really cool because it's reaching an audience and they're seeing my illustrations or my writing, and it does reach a different audience, which is really, really cool because I don't know. I think like I do draw alongs with different organizations, including some for the BBC, but just internally again. And like that when I do draw alongs, that's always really exciting because you have people coming up to you and sort of saying how much they enjoyed them, and then often I do worksheets as part of that, and they'll take them away and show other people, and so it's kind of this thing where you're giving people, you're basically telling people that everybody can draw, and you're showing them how they can do that, and then they can take these skills and show other people, and so it's kind of just you're giving people a seed, and then they are just going and sort of spreading their network everywhere else, and I think that's really cool to be able to give other people those skills, and really the confidence, because I think everybody has the ability to do things like drawing, but I think it's just a confidence thing, especially for adults, because there's this fear of failure and of not doing well enough, or of it not being perfect. And actually, nothing is ever perfect. My drawings never look the same. When I do draw alongs, I always disclaim and I'm like, well, the thing I'm about to draw, it's not going to look like the one I drew on the worksheet, and it's not going to look like the one I drew last week, but it will look like the one I'm going to draw today. And I think that's really nice. And I think, yeah, reaching when I do work for other organizations, it's cool because you do reach different people, and I think that's really exciting. And I think as well when those organizations work with someone like me, someone who does something different like art or music or whatever, they are also reaching a different audience, because like especially scientific organizations, often arts in whatever form make that organization more accessible. So I think that kind of goes both ways. But I mean, fundamentally, it's always really exciting. Like I love working with different people, and I think I find it really cool. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I guess it's like different challenges, different opportunities, different ideas, different ways of thinking, like that all feed into making what you do not like not. I was about to say better, which sounds like, oh, you need to get, but you know what I mean. Like it just makes you more like like more well rounded because you're learning from all these people.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you work with, so for example, like the poetry book that I did most recently, that was working with, that was like funded by the Cameron Bespoke Trust Young Naturalist Fund, and like as part of that, like like I was speaking to like Corin, and that it, and I also had like, this is the first time I've had like a forward from like, so I had a forward from Tiffany Francis Baker, which was really exciting, and I had like also had like, I had a few people looking over stuff, like almost acting as like external editors and stuff, and that really pushes you, and it kind of pushes you to kind of, I don't know, improve it and make it the best it can be. And I think like I'm writing a book at the moment for with the publishers, and that's really cool. But again, it's kind of pushing me in a different way, because that's really new to me. That's something I've never really done before, and so I think and you're learning from the people that you're around. And like with the book, for example, I'd been speaking to scientists, and then I'm learning from them, and I'm learning about their writing styles and their research, and also about how they want to tell that story, and then how I can use that to tell my elements of that story. And so yeah, like working with different people, like you kind of just have to, like, I think arts are, they're solo but they're also collaborative. Like I do it by myself, but I couldn't do it if I didn't have other people.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, yeah, and I mean, the whole podcast is just a way for me to learn from other people. So that's just a we are all doing it all the time. These things we're like, yeah, we're growing and learning and going like, oh, I need to. Oh, like I'd never thought about it in this way, or I'd never talked to somebody like this before, or I'd never seen the world in this way or through this lens before. And so, yeah, it's really really important and interesting. And I guess like sets up quite nicely because I was going to ask about the writing and things as well, and like the poetry book and things, because it's so different to guess like how I was introduced to you through the kind of like visual art.
Mhm.
But before I ask you about that, before we move, because I guess the like we kind of focused mainly a lot on the visuals so far. Like, are there any pieces that like at this point, before we move on to talking about poems and all these sorts of things, like is there any pieces that you think back on and you're like, these are the things that I'm like proudest of in this kind of realm of what you do? Like, are there things where you're like, I love this one or that one, or what? Which is it?
Oh, this is a good question. I think that it's kind of like what I said firstly. Like whenever I finish a piece, often I do have an immediate connection with it, and I will love it. But there are a few pieces where I think that they are ones which maybe don't have an expiry date with how much I will love them, which is nice. I think the whale, naturally, because I think that was like a big thing with regards to helping me become a little bit more established as a wildlife artist, and kind of it introduced me to a whole community of other wildlife artists. It has opened doors for me, that piece, and I think I still really love it, and I recognize a huge amount of skill in my past self in being able to do that. And I think that I just did it with one biro. Like it was just, it's the simplest media possible. It's something most people really have access to, a pen or a pencil. And I think that was all that piece was. And it was drawn on some mount board. Like it wasn't anything particularly fancy. It was just an off cut from a framers, I think, and my dad happened to have some in the garage, and I just pulled it out and sketched. And I think that simplicity of it as well, and the fact that it was just something, wasn't anything fancy, and I think that is really nice. And I think, I mean, currently my favorite piece alongside that is the elephant, and I have a feeling that that might be the only other piece that I can think of where at the moment it might sit alongside the whale as a piece where I really love it, just because it feels, the elephant is also in biro, but it's got ink and acrylic on it as well. And I think that was a piece that took sort of equally as long as the whale. And so I think those pieces at the moment feel like the ones where I'll be like, yeah, no, they're the ones that I wouldn't want to part with. I think every other piece, art is always for sale, art is always moving around and going to other people, but they're the ones at the moment where I really wouldn't want to part with them.
Fair, fair. And I feel like you're really setting up this elephant. Like
Oh no!
you're really getting ready for the lot. Like the expectations. The listeners could be
Oh
like, "This
man,
is going to be
I'll
the
show it
bar
to
is
you.
high."
I can send it to you so you can see it early. But like, yeah.
And then, yeah, I can be like, "Wow!" Like, yeah, I
Oh,
will
you
really,
might
I can wind people up.
so disappointing. Worst.
No, never. Never. Uh, well, no, I can't believe it. And I can't believe it because I recently got, what a great segue. I recently got to read this, and your work never lets me down, which is like, yes. So we've talked a lot about the visual kind of things that you do, but for listeners, you obviously didn't see because you're listening. I just held up a copy of Multicolored Ghost Towns, which is your new kind of poetry book, which also has little pieces of art throughout it, which I really appreciated. But like, yeah, so it's a poetry book, which, given the fact that we have just talked a lot about creating things that are all very like, yeah, visual, it seems interesting. And I guess some people might be like, oh, how, a jack of all trades, like able to do all sorts of things. Like, what inspired? I guess we've kind of touched on it throughout, like how you were writing when you were younger, and like, I guess I don't really know what the question is. I just want to know so much more about like how you get like like why poetry, what made you want to go into that kind of, like, what, like, where did that all come from? Like, I feel like we could go through the same 10 questions again about like all the different process, but we'll try and keep it a bit shorter because we've already talked for a while. But like, yeah, like, why poetry? What was it, what was the inspiration? Why go into that as well? Like, what was going on in your brain that made you be like, yes, let's do that?
Yeah, yeah. I well, firstly, this is my third poetry collection, which is really weird and cool. But weird because yeah, I think I have always been writing, and I think a lot of what I was writing was poetry, just because poetry and story is like fiction. But poetry particularly because I think it's because it's short. And so you can finish it, because I think I love writing stories, but I mean, there's some stories I've been writing for years. Like,
Mhm.
it's just hard. Poetry has always felt quite natural because it's very, it's emotional, but it's short, it's quick, and I think because of the way words come to me, it is this sort of, it comes quite fully formed, and then it's a way of writing it. So I think it's just felt quite natural, and I think because I was doing it as a child and just kept doing it, and I used to do a lot of competitions for wildlife photography, but also for writing, and I think that was really encouraging for me because I, you don't get into loads of things, but when you do get into things, that's really exciting because it's like, oh, someone else sort of can see something in it. And poetry is great because people read all sorts into it. Like, I had a poem about a spaniel, and people read all sorts into it. It was wild. I was like, I wanted to write about a dog, and people had all sorts of interpretations. It was wonderful. But so I think poetry is cool because it does open up in a really different way. But it was just a very natural form of expression, I think, especially with emotions. And my first collection was written over, I can't remember how many years it was. It might have been like over the span of maybe like 10 years, because the youngest poem in there that was part of the official collection I wrote when I was like 10 or 11. Um, and so that was like kind of first poetry collection. It was a real sort of mishmash of stuff, like following my development, I guess, and how my relationship with the natural world had changed. The second poetry collection was all about sand dunes, which was really fun, and that was because it was like essentially like a little piece on commission for a Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, and that was really fun because it was exploring a habitat using words. And then this one was written over like 5 years, I guess, unintentionally, because there are some poems that are, yeah, from like the end of my teenage years, and some poems were written like as I was working on the collection, so like as fresh as they could have got, really. And I think again that's really cool because it's like a mixture of sort of being a young adult, and I think it dealt with the reason I like poetry and the reason that this collection kind of came about was because it was a way of me exploring a lot of difficult things that I'd been through, and so things like trauma and grief and loss and love, and like all of those kind of really big things that often start happening to you when you are like late teens, early 20s. Dealing with those things, those themes, using the natural world. That's kind of how that collection came about. I think often I'll just get an itch and I'll just start writing poems, and then eventually they start forming into something, and you're like, oh, they all seem to be forming into this theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like and that's the what I kind of liked about it was like, and knowing that now in more, I'm like, it's interesting because there is some of them where I'm like, I read them and I'm like, it's not. It sounds like it's all the same person, but
Mm,
it sounds like different versions of the same person have written this.
yeah.
So now to be like, oh, this was written over a span of time, I'm like, this makes this, I can see this. And
Yeah.
what I like the just, yeah, I really like love it. I think that's so, like, such an interesting way of like, yeah, I like, yeah, that makes so much more sense. And I'm like, this, I love the fact that like, yeah, that you are able to draw on all of these ideas and things that you've had and put them together and kind of see these themes emerge and still make it about the natural world, still make it something that like has that attachment to all of your passions and interests. It's not suddenly like, oh well, I've written a collection of poems about architecture, which is all would also be valid, but like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Like it's really interesting to see like these things. And I think it's also like, I think incredibly, whenever I read someone's poetry, I think I'm always like, this is an incredibly brave thing to have done as well, because
It's,
it's like, yeah, it's,
if
I don't know. Sorry, did you have something
No,
to
I
say?
mean
Yeah,
it is more personal. Like my poetry, it's much, yeah, it is way more personal. It feels like you're bearing you a little bit. You're bearing your soul a little bit because it is very. It feels all art is personal, but I think poetry is really sort of like, I think it's because it's so emotional often, and I think
yeah,
often it deals with things that are more emotional and more personal. And I think, yeah, it's why I mean, also because social media algorithms don't like poetry that much, but the bigger reason is that I don't put as much on like social media is because it is more personal, and it is harder to do that, and I think to do it and for it to reach people, you'd have to read it, and I think that in itself adds another layer of sort of um like yeah, it is scarier than I think some of the other art forms.
yeah. But I think that in its scariness makes it almost not more powerful, but makes it powerful in a different way. Like I think that like bearing of like, this is what I was thinking, and this is how I feel about certain things, or this is, yeah. I always like I have like, I wouldn't say I am a poet by any means. I am not. But like, there's sometimes where I'll have these things and I'll write these ideas down. And like reading your book, I was like, I should do this. I should try and put
Yeah,
something together like this.
do it.
But then afterwards, I'm all well. I read back on things and I'm like, if you know me, you're gonna know what this is about, and that makes me nervous. Where I'm like, oh, someone might read this and go, I know who you're talking about. I know what this is about. I
I
know
think
what this, and
though
that
it's
makes me scared.
you that worries. Like I actually don't think that many people, and maybe one person might, but it's okay because they already knew. So
Yeah,
so it's okay.
yeah. This is true. This is true. This is yeah. This is, and if like, look at the people we idolize. If Taylor Swift can go out there and write an entire album, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's about Harry Styles or this person or that person," I can write about someone no one's gonna know. No, it's fine. No, that's fantastic. Like really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. And like, yeah, I guess something to highlight. I guess, and I was gonna say, can people? What I'll do is like, I mean, I say this like I hadn't planned it already, but listeners, later in the week, after this episode comes out, there will be a second episode where I will show you a video episode. So I will show you the book, and I will maybe read one or two of the poems, maybe one of my favorites, and I'll ask you for one of yours as well, to like, yeah, give you a taste of some of the poems that are in there because they're just fantastic. And just to give a flavor of some of the other things, because you can all go and look at the art yourselves, whereas I feel like a dramatic reading I can
Oh,
provide you.
dramatic reading. I think everyone needs
Yeah.
that from you.
Oh yeah, I'll try and do it in the most dulcet Scottish tones as well, just to really like nail it. Yeah, Yeah. But like, okay, like I guess like I have now noticing the time, and I've realized we have talked for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, and so there are a couple questions I usually ask. Do we have the time to quickly do the last couple questions?
I have
Is that
time
okay?
for this. Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. This is always my fault is I ask people for an hour and then I'm like, we don't have a time to do this all in an hour. There's too many things I want to know.
I think
Um,
we talked, like
but
we talked before we started, and that's always a good.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's one of those ones where I'm like, and hopefully people are still listening. I think people, well, if it's two people having a good time, you're still listeners. You're still out there. It's fine. So, I'm sure someone's out there. But
There's one person
yes,
connecting with us still.
that was what we were saying earlier. It's the whole point. Anyway, so the final questions are the same questions I ask everybody, and the first of those questions is how can people be more involved in kind of conservation or nature? And I guess like especially from you, it would be interesting to hear because I feel like a lot of people will think they can't do what you do because they'll be like, oh, I can't draw or I can't paint or I can't write. It'd be interesting to hear what you would say to those people and like how they can be more involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, firstly, I do actually think that everybody can engage in the arts in some form. And even if you think you can't draw, maybe you can sing, maybe you can write music, maybe you can write, maybe you can animate, like maybe you can do film. Like there's so many options. And so I think everybody has the capacity to be creative because being creative is such a human thing. And then you can use that creativity to spread messages. And it doesn't have to be an environmental message, but that's just what I particularly like. And I imagine if you're listening to this, that's what you particularly like. I hope so. Um, but yeah, so I think the biggest thing is just starting and having that kind of courage to kind of be like, yeah, let's just see what happens. I think I tend to just go into things now being like, yeah, let's just see what happens. Like, let's just see what happens if I use this media today. And and so I think it is just knowing that the first thing you do won't be the best thing you do. It'll probably be the worst thing you do if it goes right because you want to improve and that's really exciting. And so I think it is just a case of starting, but then it's a case of working out who you want to reach with your work and how you want it to get out there. And social media is great because it does help you reach that audience, but you do have to have a slightly careful relationship with it because you don't want to just get validation from likes and stuff. So then it's a case of seeing if you can work with people. Like I think some of the most exciting things that I've done have been collaborations with other organizations, with other people. Um, I think that's the case for lots of artists. It's great fun to work with other people, even if you're just working solo, but you're creating something for someone else. Um, like I did a banner for an art shop in London, and that was really cool because it was creating something with Dayla Brownie, who I work with as an artist for London Graphic Centre. And so that was like, I guess, three people involved, me and those two organisations, creating something that was, I did it environmentally, but that wasn't something that either of those organisations do normally. They're both art organisations. So I think it is finding those different avenues and trying to take those opportunities, um, and make your own opportunities. Speak to people. I used to ask, and I still do, like ask loads of questions to everybody and ask people how they got places and how they got opportunities and speak to them. And if you like their work and you want to work with them, ask because the worst they'll do is ignore you. And the second worst thing they'll do is say no. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Like I love that advice of like, yeah, like I especially the thing of being like learning that the first thing you do is going to be probably not the best thing. Like I really but also I feel like sometimes like yeah, like sometimes accepting that even if those things that you think are the worst thing you do like
people might love
are like these people might exactly like
you.
because I remember there's still like some of the earliest episodes of the podcast where I'm like the audio is not
Yeah.
top tier. Like there are like there's some of the most listened to ones, and there's still some of the ones where people come up to me and are like, when I listened to episode whatever it was where you talked about how pangolins die on electric fences, which is an exceptionally emotional and sad story, so I'm not going to tell it now. But like it's not good. But it's in terms of like my mind and production value and the things that I did, probably one of the worst things that I've ever done. But the emotion and the point was there. And so like even if like you look at it and you think maybe this isn't the best, like someone else might look at it and think it's wonderful and like captures their imagination and really hits them. So yeah, it's like, yeah, learning that not to be too hard on yourself, I guess, when you're getting into these things is hard, but really important, really, really important.
It's having that self-respect with your own work, I think, and just knowing that, like, I like you will not always like all of your work, but actually somebody will probably always like one thing. Like, I remember there's a piece of mine, it's of a shark, and I think I always had a bit of a thing where I was like, I'm not sure if I really like it, but I wasn't sure how much I liked it, and I also wasn't sure if it was as good because it was a bit gorier. And someone we both know, Steph, who's been on this podcast, she loves it. Like, it was like her favorite piece, and I was like, oh wow, okay, so someone does like this, like this piece. That's great. And
Yeah.
I think that's like also another point. Like, it's nice when you let artists know if you like their work. Artists in any discipline, like podcasters, like filmmakers. If you say which of their things you like, you will make their day, because nobody ever really. I don't know if you find this, but no one really actually says what they like. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one actually communicates that to you, and so you're just kind of there, like. And then, so when someone says that it's my favorite piece, it genuinely means a lot to you.
It's. I think it's easier in the world that we've built. It's easier to say that things you don't like. It's because it then reveals less about you, and you kind of are maybe scared to put yourself out and say like, I love this, or I did that, or I like really appreciate this, and also we're kind of not like, you don't want to. We're shamed if we gush about things sometimes, or we're made to feel small if we really love something and are passionate about things that other people don't love. And I'm like, no, because if you tell me you really like something, that's going to go into the world and tell everybody that you appreciate, and all the things that you love, or the photographs or the pictures or the paintings or the books or the podcasts or the films, tell the people who made them you love them, because like,
Literally.
it's, yeah, it'll go such a long way to making a more positive space for us all to work and exist in. Yeah, and
Well,
like, yeah. Oh,
oh,
sorry.
no, no, I was just gonna say, like, literally, like, the artists and stuff that I like, when they do things that I love, I will, like, shout about them from the rooftops, because I'll be like, that is a great piece, that is an amazing animation, or this is a fantastic poem, or whatever. And I'll just talk anyone's ear off about it, and especially the ones that like lodged in my memory. Like, there's an animation I adore about a Hawaiian bird species, and I literally I speak to anyone about it, because I'm just like, this is so good.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
I think it's having, being excited. It shouldn't be such a, like, loving things and being excited about them. It shouldn't be such a thing where everyone's like, they're excited about something gross. Like, it
Yeah.
like, it's such a weird mentality, but it should just be encouraged, because it's great to be excited
Hmm.
about stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. And I think, yeah, like, that's a good, I love that. That's a good, hopeful message to kind of be moving towards the end of the show on. I like, love it. I love it, love it, love it. Like, and the next question I ask everyone is, if you could, obviously we've talked about some of your pieces and some of the things that inspired them, but if you had to pick one species, plant, animal, whatever it is, if you had to pick one underappreciated species that you want to shine the spotlight on for people to think about, go away, think about, what is it? Why do you love it?
Oh, just one is sad. I I I really love Arctic terns. I think that they are fantastic, because I think that they have like the longest migration of like any bird species, and people can Google it because I can't remember off the top of my head. But they are also really territorial, and so they're really good parents, because they're just like protecting their babies. And like, when I was photographing them, I just have such fond memories of them, because they are very just like, they hover over you and they will squawk and they will dive bomb you, and they just have so much character. And I think that the fact that they have such long migrations, like, they put themselves through so much when they're migrating between their breeding sites and their feeding sites. And I think that they're very beautiful and they can hover. And I like the fact that they can, I always think it's great when things like birds, seabirds, they have the best of all worlds, because they have the sky, they have the sea, and they have the land. And I just think that's so lucky. They get everything. And the only thing they haven't got is underground, but they've got everything else. And I just think there's a lot of, I just think they're really cool, and I just love them so much, because I just think that they're experiencing everything, and they're going around all the time, and they're just, yeah, I just really love them. And I don't know if I think they are kind of underappreciated. I think people often brush them under the side, and they think of other birds like seagulls, which actually don't exist, because it's just a big term for lots of different kinds of gull. But I think terns often get brushed with that, and I think, yeah, Arctic terns.
I think that's a good choice. That's a good choice, especially because, yeah, if you're talking seabirds, I feel like you've got like A-listers like the puffin
Yeah,
and the gannet and like the albatross and like all these things that like they
people
get
know.
this like, yeah, people know them. And then you get down to, not that they're worse, but you get down to the things that people are less familiar with.
Yeah.
And then they become kind of really hard to pick. But that is a good choice. I'm a big fan. And I'm also a big fan because just a couple of weeks ago, the migration thing was a question in a pub quiz that I was at, and I got it right. And I was like, and everyone, you know that way where you're doing something and everyone, a question comes up and everyone at the table looks at you because you're the animal-y, naturey person at the
Yeah.
table, and you're like expected to know the answer. And I was like, I
Ooh,
think it's this.
yeah.
Like, yeah. No, that's a fantastic choice. Fantastic choice. And I guess final question is, this is an easy one. Where can people go to keep up to date with your work? Where should they be following? What should they be doing? Where should they be going? Yeah, let us know.
Yeah. The best thing that I am most active on is Instagram. So, but in general, my handle for everything is Alicia Hayden Wildlife, with the exception of Twitter/X, where I have to be Alicia Hayden Art because wildlife was too long, and so I was either going to be Alicia Hayden Will or Alicia Hayden Art. So yeah, I'm most active on Instagram though, but all of the social media platforms, including TikTok, I am on. TikTok, I have tried to pick up again recently, so we'll see how long that lasts because I find it's a bit unnatural for me, I think.
Yeah. 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 So I'm the same. I am on all those things, but whether I use them or not is another question. They come and go with waves. Like
This
I'm
is
like I always go in with the best of intentions and then who knows?
me
Like
too.
maybe something. Yeah. Um well, yes, I guess then I will put links to all of those things in the description of this episode so people can go down, have a look, have a kind of, yeah, poke around and see like, oh, go and have a look at all the art we've actually talked about, and go and see the whale and all these things. And yes, I'll put links to all of our social media down there as well. We're at Pangolin Podcast on everything. I am at the only Jack Baker on Instagram, and similarly had an issue with Twitter where that was too long. So I am at only Jack Baker on there, which has a slightly more sad undertone than just the only, but you know, it's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So all of that is, yeah, going to be in the description of this episode. And as I said, there'll be another episode coming out in a few days' time where I will talk through one of the poems, have a little reading and show off for the book. And it'll be a video episode available on Spotify. And so you should go and make sure and subscribe and follow so you don't miss out on that. And yeah, we have so many other amazing guests coming up. We have had amazing guests before, so if you've discovered us this time, go back and have a look around and see what you can find. And yeah, make sure to follow, give us a nice review, all the classic things. After saying numbers don't matter, please do the numbers. Yeah. And I guess that means the only thing left to say is a huge thank you, Alicia, for your like time, your insights, your chat, your conversations, the everything. It's been such a fascinating conversation, and I'm so glad I used this as an excuse to sit down and pick your brains about these things. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, it was 2 years in the making, so I'm glad that we did it eventually.
I can't believe that people keep putting timestamps on things recently. Where like I had a guest on who I think will be the season finale, so I'll not say who it was, but they were one of my first ever guests on the podcast, and they were like, "It's been 4 years since we last recorded," and I was like, "Oh no!" Like, oh, like I
Yeah.
can't believe it's been 2 years. That's mad, absolutely mad. Well, thank you so much for waiting your turn so politely after 2 years. And yeah, I guess then until next time, I will also say a huge thank you to all the listeners. And yes, goodbye.